Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today, and I'm sorry I cannot be there. I'm based in Australia and unfortunately cannot travel. Reggie Wu, however, is in the audience, and he is Flotation Energy's General Manager in Taiwan, so hopefully you'll be able to meet him and talk to him. I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce you to Flotation Energy, who we are, what we do, about progress with the Kincardine floating offshore wind project and other projects we're involved in floating and bottom fixed offshore wind, and then finally some thoughts on floating wind in Taiwan. We're a specialist offshore wind developer, mastering in floating offshore wind. The company was set up a few years ago on the back of developing the Kincardine floating offshore wind project. Alan McCaskill and Lord Nicholas Stevens conceived that project and developed it and brought in ACS Cobra to where it is now, which is in construction. And I'll come back to that shortly. With world-class expertise and a distinguished track record in delivering not only floating offshore wind, but also bottom fixed offshore wind. We've, between the principals, delivered over 3 gigawatts of bottom fixed offshore wind in the UK and progressing a number of projects, which I'll come back to shortly. We're pioneering what we call the energy transition, which really is bringing offshore wind alongside oil and gas infrastructure to provide power and to decarbonise the oil and gas industry. And we have a number of projects in development. In total, we've got 10 gigawatts or more in the international project pipeline in the UK, broader Europe, Australia, Taiwan, Japan. And we have offices and subsidiaries in Japan, Taiwan, and Australia as well. Some of the photos you can see there are the projects we've been involved in, which include the Beatrice offshore wind demonstrator, which is now 13 years ago, but at the time was developed by Alan McCaskill, one of the founding directors of Flotation, and was the largest turbines, the first on jacket structures in the deepest water, and the first to provide power to the offshore oil platform. That then led to a 588 megawatt project called the Beatrice offshore wind farm, which was commissioned 2 years ago. So it just shows you from little things, big things can grow. And then the picture on the right is actually the first turbine of the Kincardine project. The Kincardine project was developed by the Flotation Energy team. It was developed by Alan McCaskill, Nicholas Stevens, and the majority of the team that are now formed Flotation Energy. 4 years ago, part of that project was sold to ACS Cobra at the point where we had approvals and is now in the construction phase. It is the world's largest grid-connected floating wind farm, 50 megawatts of capacity, 15 kilometres off Aberdeen in 60 to 80 metres of water. So it's off Aberdeen in Scotland. It consists of 5 9.5 megawatt Vestas machines, wind turbines, on PPI designed floating bases, and a single 2 megawatt unit as well. The single unit was deployed at the start of the project to achieve grid connection, and then more recently we brought in 2 of the 9.5 megawatt turbines, which are on site now, and the other 3 turbines are in assembly with full deployment due by June this year. So it's a very exciting project indeed, and a world leader, and significantly it provides a lot of opportunity for lessons learned. I don't think we would do this project in the same way again. Other speakers today have spoken about where floating offshore wind is going and the opportunities, but there really is no substitute for developing a floating project, going through the process of working with the policies and the regulations, and then moving through that development construction phase and learning what's got to change in order to move from demonstration scale project into those early commercial projects. PPI was chosen in this case because it was the most mature foundation available at the time and enabled the project to secure project financing as well. And the photo you see there is one of the turbines being towed out of port. Flotation are also involved in bottom fixed. I mentioned before we've developed 3 gigawatts of bottom fixed, which is now in construction or operation. More recently, we secured seabed rights to 480 megawatt site in the Irish Sea off the coasts of England and Wales. That was in partnership again with ACS Cobra, who we've formed a very good relationship with. Flotation Energy are driving development of that project. It also sits alongside existing oil and gas assets in Morecambe Bay, giving us the opportunity to power those assets with offshore wind and to decarbonise that side of the petroleum industry, but also potentially to reuse some of those onshore and offshore assets, personnel, share vessels during decommissioning. So this is a hugely exciting project, and Flotation and Cobra won the rights against the likes of BP, Total and RWE, who spoke earlier. Some of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world have entered the offshore wind space recently in a big way and are investing very strongly, and that can only be a good thing to push offshore wind further, and in particular to push floating wind further, where they can leverage their expertise in delivering large infrastructure projects, floating platform designs and operation, and of course the balance sheet to go with it. The energy transition then is all about us providing power to offshore platforms, but also reusing some of those assets. And obviously petroleum companies are in a very unique position to participate, given they own and develop these assets, but they're also looking at decommissioning as well. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We've made significant progress in this area. We are developing a 300 megawatt floating offshore wind project in the North Sea with a major international oil company, and we hope to be able to announce that in the coming weeks. So that's a huge project that really takes us from a demonstration project with Kincardine through to that early commercial scale. And we've obviously secured the Morecambe Bay offshore wind farm and a number of international projects in development as well, including in the energy transition. International-wise, which is the area I lead as Director for Flotation, we're very active in Asia with a focus on floating wind. We have offices in Taiwan and Japan, and Reggie Wu is there to take your questions. We've also been very active in looking at where in Taiwan would suit floating offshore wind, why, and the opportunity it presents. And I'm of the firm belief Taiwan is in a great position to lead floating wind in the Asia Pacific region, to develop a domestic industry, and indeed to export that expertise as well. What's needed, of course, is enabling policies and regulations, but also a planned way to do it. And that involves looking at where is suitable, avoiding areas that are clearly not, and putting a plan in place for how you support an emerging industry, how you build scale sustainably, and how you actually then can see an industry grow out of that. We're also very active in Europe with projects in Ireland and Norway, and indeed in Australia on offshore wind, mainly bottom fixed projects, including the energy transition. Now, just going back to Taiwan, we've identified a number of areas that are suitable, much the same as other speakers today. We've prioritised one of those. We started offshore surveys in the EIA process, and we're very excited to be doing that. But we also believe that development is a domestic business. It's a business that needs to be done, in this case in Taiwan, and in partnership with local companies, whether they are developers, investors, whether they're engineering, procurement companies, or indeed others with an interest in floating. We offer unique expertise and a track record, being a specialist developer of offshore wind. We have strong joint venture partnerships, which we can bring into Taiwan if needs be, a large international pipeline, other projects in development, bottom fixed, including the Morecambe Bay side. We're pioneering the energy transition, and this really is taking quite an innovative approach to offshore wind, and some would say doing it the hard way, but that's in our DNA with half the company coming out of oil and gas as well. We welcome opportunities to speak to you, both the supply chain, of course, and prospective developers. We're more than open to that. As I said, we believe it's a domestic business. We want to see offshore wind commercialised. We want to see it succeed in Taiwan and in a sustainable way. There's some private contacts for you, including the board of directors, Reggie Wu, who's there with you today, and Nobu Suzuki, who's our general manager in Japan. It's been a pleasure presenting to you. Thank you very much for your time.